I first like to point out this hat on my head. My girlfriend thinks I look like a homeless bum, and I have decided to wear it in this video purely for her benefit. Now, I did an episode of We Get Technical, which I only had 2 episodes on the channel. I decided to finally bring this segment back. I am going to try to produce some more videos of We Get Technical. On that episode of We Get Technical, where I showed you how to add ROMs and thumbnails to the Super Retro-Cade, I also talked about how fond I am of the Super Retro-Cade and that I would be producing several videos on the device, and this is one of them. I talked about testing several different controllers on the device because apparently the USB ports on the front of the console are supposed to handle many different variations. Now, I have ordered a ton of different controllers that I will be testing on the Super Retro-Cade. First controller, which I've already had before and I actually did a review on, is the Retro Fighters Jab controller. Now, the only reason I'm going to test this is because this has the dual link on the front with the NES connector and the USB connector. I'm going to see if that works on the Super Retro-Cade. 8-bit do F30 controller. I have done a review on this controller as well. I will leave a link to that in the description down below. I got the 8-bit Retro NES receiver. We're going to use that. We're going to test that. The Retro-bit NES connector to USB adapter. This is obviously where we're going to plug in the 8-bit NES receiver and see if that works. We also have a special surprise. I'm going to announce that towards the end of this video. I'm not going to actually show you what that is. Hopefully that will work, because if that works, Super Retro-Cade is going to be my go-to system from now on for playing retro games. I got the Hyperkin GN6 retro style Sega Genesis controller. Now, this is supposed to work on your PC and Mac. Since it has a USB connector, we're going to test it on the Super Retro-Cade. I got 2 NES INEX game controllers. These are very generic. They're probably from China, which honestly, to tell you the truth, I think the Chinese controllers are definitely going to work on the Super Retro-Cade. I got a generic NES controller that I did purchase on the Wish app. It does feel really cheap, but that doesn't matter. What matters is if it functions on the Super Retro-Cade. We're going to test that one as well. I got the Retro-Bit Retro 8. I also have this. I had purchased this before and didn't realize it was the NES Classic Edition, which I could use on my Wii, but I finally got the USB version. I got the 3 custom Retro-Bit Sega Genesis, SNES, and the NES controllers. These are the ones with the dual link cables as well, with the USB and the actual system's connector. I'm hoping these work, seeing where they are built by Retro-Bit. Now, as I said, I also have one other controller, but I am not going to announce that until we actually test it on the Super Retro-Cade. I'm really hoping that works, because if it does, it's going to bring a whole new gaming experience to the Retro-Bit Super Retro-Cade. Alright guys, forgive me, I know I'm still recording this way. I am in the works. I know I keep saying that on getting a capture device. I know the lighting is pretty bad when I record this way. These newer little lights aren't powerful enough or not bright enough to shine on here, and I try to lift them up a little to try to limit the glare. But let's get into it. I'm first going to try out this cheap generic Chinese NES style controller that I got on the Wish app. Let's see if that works. I think it is going to work. I think these Chinese controllers are going to work the best because they're pretty generic and don't require any drivers or anything. So let's go ahead and hook this up. And as you can see, we're moving through the menu with this cheap generic Chinese controller. Let's go ahead and play a game. Let's play Congo's Capers and see how it works. The start button's working. And the D-pad's working. Jump button's working. This cheap controller is really stiff. The action buttons are working. Alright, let's not go too far into it. This generic NES controller from China that I got off the Wish app, working perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and move on to these INEX game controllers. These are NES style controllers as well. I got these on Amazon. They're obviously probably from a Chinese manufacturer. You get 2 in the box, so that's a plus. Let's go ahead and check them out. I have a lot of confidence that these are working because they're probably the same thing as that other generic, cheap Chinese non-name brand controller. And as you can see, the D-pad is working. Let's go ahead and let's play Final Fight 2. Start button's working. Everything seems to be working pretty good. Everything seems to be working perfectly fine. Let's say that these INEX NES controllers, they do work. Now you get, this is the traditional US version of the controller with the purple buttons. I'm pretty sure that, yeah, both of them are like that, but you can pick up the European style one with the red, blue, green, and yellow. This is the Retro Fighters Jab controller. I did a review on that. There will be a link in the description down below. It's a great NES controller, and it does work pretty good on your PC and in emulators for other games. But let's go ahead and try to see if it works via USB on the Retro-Cade. I cannot move anything with the D-pad, but the analog stick is moving through the menus. None of the other buttons are working. So that's a letdown so far. The Retro Fighters Jab controller is not working, but we're not gonna count this guy out yet. Like I said, I have an adapter that goes from NES connector to USB connector, so we're gonna see if it works via that route. Now we're gonna take the 8-bit do N30, I can't remember, controller. I did a review on this guy too. That will be in, a link will be in the description down below. We're going to try it via USB. It's blinking green. And as you see, nothing is moving. Nothing's working. Hold this in. Still nothing working. The 8-bit do N30 is not working via USB cable into the Super Retro-Cade, but we're not, just like the Jab controller, we're not going to count this guy out yet because I have the 8-bit do NES wireless adapter. We're going to try that. Next, we got the Hyperkin GN6 Retro Style Genesis controller. Looks just like a standard 6-button Genesis controller. Moving through the menus perfectly fine. Let's get a Genesis game going. Actually, let me put my SD card in here. Alright, we got my ROMs loaded up here. If you haven't seen the video on adding other games, other ROMs, and thumbnails to the Super Retro-Cade, do check the link in the description down below. Starts working. Action button seems to be working. It paused. He's moving good. Shooting. I die a lot in Contra, you'll find that out. Anyway, the controller, the Hyperkin GN6 Genesis style controller is working perfectly fine in the Super Retro-Cade. So if you're looking for a Genesis controller for your Super Retro-Cade, check out the Hyperkin GN6. Next controller we're going to take a look at is manufactured by the same company, Retrobit, who makes the Super Retro-Cade. That is the Retro 8. This is pretty much the same controllers that come with the Res Plus. If you haven't taken a look at that, that is a NES clone designed by Retrobit. I did a review on that. Link will be in the description down below. I pretty much assume this controller is going to work. We're moving perfectly through the menu. Now, the only problem with using these controllers, as you can see, there's only 2 action buttons. I cannot press X to get on the filter, but if you're looking to get that traditional NES feel, this will work. But we should be perfectly fine. As you can see, the controller is working. I will say the D-pad is a little stiff, but we're not reviewing this controller. We're just stating whether it works on the Super Retro-Cade, and it does. The Retro-8 controller works on the Super Retro-Cade. Next, we're going to test out. These have the same dual connector that the Jab controller has, but these are manufactured by Retro-Bit, so hopefully they will work via the USB cable. Who knows? We're going to find out right now. Let's test out the NES version of it with Ghosts and Goblins. Seeing that the Jab controller didn't work via USB on these dual connectors, I don't see these working. We might have a better chance because it's manufactured by Retro-Bit, but I doubt it. Well, we're moving through the menu, so that's promising. Let's play Ghosts and Goblins. The start button worked. I could be wrong. I am proven wrong. These are working, unlike the Jab controller from Retro Fighters. They are working. So that's a plus. The Retro-Bit NES dual connector controller did work on the Super Retro-Cade, so if you're looking for a cool looking nostalgic controller. Now we're going to take a look at the Retro-Bit's Street Fighter II Genesis dual connector controller. We're moving through the menus. That's promising. Let's play some Sunset Riders. That's not promising. Yep, we don't appear to be working, unfortunately. That is kind of upsetting. Now let's go ahead and test the NES version, which the color scheme on this for Mega Man looks amazing. Alright, we're moving through the menus, but as we've seen with the Genesis controller and the Jab controller, that means absolutely nothing. So let's go ahead and let's play Holy Diver. Nope. Once again, the NES version does not work either. So that's a letdown as well. Nothing but the D-pad is working just like the Genesis version. That kind of sucks. Now we're going to open this adapter. This is the Retro-8 controller adapter. It has a NES connector to USB. We're going to see if maybe we can use some standard USB connector controllers on the Super Retro-Cade. Because essentially you have a NES connector on one side and a USB on the other. Let's stick that in the Super Retro-Cade. And now we're going to try to hook up the Jab controller again and see if maybe that will work through the NES connector. Now they are connected. This is the Jab controller. It is moving through the menu, but once again is not selecting anything, so that did not help at all. The Hyperkin Retron HD controller, let's go ahead and see if that works via connecting it into the NES adapter. Now this NES adapter is from Retro-Bit, so it's unfortunate that it did not work with the Jab controller nonetheless, but let's try it with a basic NES style controller. Once again, moving through the menus, but not selecting anything. So pretty much this NES to USB adapter is pretty useless on the Retro-Bit as of now. This is the 8-bit do NES retro receiver. This will work with any 8-bit DO controller, and it's mainly supposed to allow you to use those controllers with the NES. I'm going to try to hook it in to this Retro-Bit NES to USB adapter. As of now, because those other basic controllers did not work, I don't foresee this working either. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to press the pairing button on here, and we're going to press the pairing button on here. So far, it does not look like it's connecting. So far, this is not working, so unfortunately, I do not think what I got to work with this next is gonna work. That's pretty upsetting. As I said early on in this video, I showcased or showed you all the controllers that I wanted to test on the Super Retro-Cade. Now, I said there was one that I was gonna leave to last until we actually tested the device, and that was the 8-bit DO N30 arcade stick. Let's get this thing hooked up. We're probably going to have to hook up a bunch of adapters. The 8-bit DO NES adapter and the Retro-Bit USB to NES connector adapter. Let's see if this guy works. Cross our fingers. The main thing that I wanted to work on this Retro-Cade, because it'd be nice to get a arcade stick on it. Obviously, the Retro-Bit Super Retro-Cade was meant to play arcade games, so naturally I and probably most people wanted an arcade stick to work on it. Now maybe this 8-bit DO arcade stick's not going to work. I did want a basic USB arcade stick, but a lot of them come from China. I'm probably going to end up building my own, but for now this is what I have. I'm going to test it with the 8-bit DO retro receiver. I don't think it's going to work, unfortunately, especially with this adapter. I know it has a USB, but I think the USB is mainly for charging. I got them both in pairing mode. Doesn't look like they're connecting though. Yeah, it doesn't look like it is connecting, unfortunately. It's not a big letdown. I could use this arcade stick with my Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, this NES 30 arcade stick is not working with the Super Retro-Cade. Here is a USB cord that came with the NES 30. I'm going to go ahead and try that. I don't think it's going to work, because this is mainly meant for charging and I think for Windows. But let's go ahead and give it a whirl anyway. Alright, we have it connected. The light is green. It's blinking green. We have no movement. We have some movement now, but none of the buttons are working. It's just acting to move through the menus. That sucks. Went back down to D. That's still moving. That's unfortunate. Well, there you have it. Those are all the controllers that I tested on the Super Retro-Cade. Not all of them worked. The Retro Fighters Jab controller did not, unfortunately, work. All it did was move through the menu. You had the 8-bit DO N30 Pro controller that did not work via a USB cable or the NES connector to USB cable with the 8-bit DO retro receiver. That did not work. Unfortunately, the big guy that I really wanted to work, the NES 30 arcade stick from 8-bit DO, did not work. That is unfortunate. I'm still going to be in the search for an arcade stick for the Retro-Bit Super Retro-Cade. You had the Retro-Bit NES style controller with USB connector. That did work. So if you're looking for a standard NES style controller, this will work. You had the Super NES Retro-Bit dual link cable controller. Unfortunately, did not work. You had the Sega Genesis dual link connector from Retro-Bit which did not work on Super Retro-Cade. I had the Super Ghost and Goblins NES style controller with a dual link from Retro-Bit, which did work. So it doesn't make any sense as to why one did work and the other did not. You had your generic Chinese NES style controller that I bought on the Wish app, which did work. So that was a plus. You had your INEX NES style controller, which is pretty much the same thing as that cheap Chinese one that I got from the Wish app. This, however, did come in a dual pack for I think 15 bucks or 12 bucks actually. They did work, so this was a cheap way of getting an NES controller on the Super Retro-Cade. You had the Hyperkin GN6 Genesis style controller with USB connector that did work in the Super Retro-Cade. So if you're looking for a Genesis style controller to play Genesis games on the Super Retro-Cade, take a look at the Hyperkin GN6. I did test out this NES to USB from Retro-Bit adapter. It did not work. I also tried the 8-bit do retro receiver in it that has the NES connector on it. I hooked it into the adapter, tried to get the NES 30 Pro controller working and the NES 30 arcade stick working, and unfortunately both did not work. It would not pair. If you have any questions about any of the controllers that did work that were featured in this video, even the ones that did not work, if you're still interested in getting them for other devices such as a PC or your standard clone consoles, I will leave links to those in the description down below. I'm still in search of a good arcade stick that will work on the Super Retro-Cade, because that would take the gaming experience on the Super Retro-Cade to a different level, seeing where that console was meant for arcade games. Please leave that in the description down below if you did find one that worked. I am interested to test it out myself. If you have any questions about anything in this video, please, as always, leave them in the comments down below. Let me know what other controllers you got working on the Super Retro-Cade. And if you're interested to see more from the Deem channel, such as that review finally on the Super Retro-Cade, please hit that subscribe button.